Hello, everyone, and welcome to National Clean Energy Week's Policymaker Symposium and Fireside Chat with Jigar Shah. I am Tom King. I am a director of CRES Forum and also with Jigar, Clean Tech Leaders Roundtable. And in my normal life, I am the managing partner of CrossRiver Capital and the founder of Fundación Borincana, a nonprofit that's working to accelerate the development of the transition in the grid in Puerto Rico. So our guest today is Jigar Shah. Jigar is, I guess we've known each other for a long time. But Jigar is the director of the DOE's Loan Program Office and a bit of a legend in the world of renewables. DOE's Loan Program Office provides financing to help deploy large-scale clean energy and advanced transportation projects in the U.S. He was recently the co-founder and president of Generate Capital, where he focused on helping entrepreneurs accelerate decarbonization solutions through the use of low-cost infrastructure as a service financing. Prior to that, he founded SunEdison, a company that pioneered the pay-as-you-save solar financing. After SunEdison, he was the founding CEO of the Carbon War Room, a global nonprofit founded by Sir Richard Branson and Virgin Unite to help entrepreneurs address climate change. Originally from Illinois, Shah holds a BS from the University of Illinois, UC, and an MBA from the University of Maryland, College Park. Jigar, welcome. Any introductory comments or other things that you want to add to the audience here?
Wow, I'm tired just listening to that introduction. So I appreciate you having me and really proud of our friendship.
Great. Well, let's dive into it. We actually have a short period of time here, and we could cover this for a long period of time. Let's start with the Loan Program Office. It had largely been forgotten since the days of the Recovery Act until you became its head and breathed new life. Some of the things, maybe there was one application a year at one point, and now we're getting one application a week. What kind of changes do you make, and what more can we expect?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that it all starts from the fact that the president and the secretary gave us the air cover to restart the Loan Programs Office. As the secretary suggested in her confirmation hearing, the program was largely dormant. And so we've been able to really get that level of cover to be able to do what we're doing. I'd say there's a few big things that we've been able to do, right? One is that we've been able to add about 80 people to the office. So we had an extraordinary core team of people at the Loan Programs Office who had stuck with it through thick and thin, and they're amazing. We were able to complement those folks with another 80 folks. And so we're now up to about 175 people at the Loan Programs Office, and that has been helpful. And a lot of that additional support has come in from people who are former executives of clean energy companies and have come in to really mentor a lot of the potential applicants into the program. And that has been hugely important, right? I mean, getting through the Loan Programs Office is not a core skill that many of these CEOs and CFOs have. And so helping them not feel dumb while they're navigating this thing is super important. And so I think we've, at this point, gotten 84 applications in, seeking $86.5 billion from the office. And probably have another 200 or so advanced pre-consultations that we're working through, and some of those will turn into applications, which I think is great. The other thing that I think we were able to do is really define what our risk box is with Congress, OMB, the Treasury Department, et cetera. So we now have, I think, a fundamental agreement across all of those groups around how much risk we're supposed to take and which risks we're supposed to take, and so that we can communicate that clearly to applicants and so that we're not wasting people's time. So I think that there is a clarity now about what the Loan Programs Office does, and that really largely comes from the fact that we have a $30 billion portfolio that we're actively managing from the 2009 to 2011 timeframe. So we now have a track record by which to not just be theoretical about that conversation, but also be very specific with our oversight folks. And that gives people comfort, right, that they're going to be treated fairly. I think the last thing I would say is that is that we, I think, have recognized that when you do a $3 billion project, and many of our projects are $3 to $5 billion projects, by definition, it disrupts somebody, right? It's really hard to just blend that right into the landscape. And so what does it look like to do good community engagement? What does it look like to find the labor necessary to be able to build these projects? What does it look like to source the materials that you need from friendlier countries and from our own country, and build up that manufacturing supply chain? I do think that the applicants into the Loan Programs Office today understand that asking those tough questions really results in a better project, a project that has better support from the community, and from our perspective has a greater likeliness of being repaid over the 30-year period of time. All right. And so I'd say that we've done all of those things and more. Obviously, we've streamlined our application process. We're embarking on a new rulemaking for Title 17. We've gotten additional resources from the Congress, et cetera. But I do think that we have spent a lot of time on rebuilding and strengthening our foundation, which I think has given a lot more people comfort to engage.
That's terrific. I mean, particularly on the two topics I know we've talked about before. Basically building capacity within your applicants, and now having the capacity to build that capacity. And the other is to have an understanding about risk that was so poorly translated the last time around. If you're managing towards zero risks in this business, you're doing something wrong. So zero losses is a failure, not a success. So, and I think along those lines, and one thing I recognized, and you may have touched on it in your answer, but you brought a different philosophy here from Generate Capital, and it's one of those things that I would describe as, in simpler language, one and done is a recipe for failure. If you're just trying to finance the serial number one plant and assume that's all the things that are needed in order to commercialize it, then you're going to be letting a lot of companies down. And so you brought the idea of a more programmatic, a more systemic support system to the loans that you're doing for companies as they're commercializing. It's not about just financing that first commercial plant. How did you implement that, or how have you applied that at the LPO?
Yeah, I mean, I think to give proper credit, I mean, obviously the president has talked about industrial strategy before. So I think this really fits within that industrial strategy piece. And certainly, my predecessors here in this office, I think, did operate under those tools, even though we may have come up with some, beautiful graphics and some different words to use. But, I think what we're talking about here is a bridge to bankability, right? The Department of Energy has long been an extraordinary place to do innovation and will remain so. I think the secretary is fully committed to that. But I think what we haven't been given the mandate to do by Congress in the past is really play in that commercialization space. And so the Loan Programs Office was sort of an island in and of itself on commercialization. Today, you've got an entire undersecretary for infrastructure that's been set up by the secretary, and that includes state and local government coordination. It includes the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations, which is got a mandate to do those things. And I think for a long time, the words that we used was a lot around demonstration, right? We need to demonstrate the technology at scale. And once that demonstration happens, and the private sector will take over. I think that is patently false. I think everyone now agrees that it's patently false. And people are now starting to use the vernacular that we've put in place around this bridge to bankability. Yeah. And that bridge to bankability has 4 major milestones. The first being what everyone expected, which is the first of a kind deployment, right? To really demonstrate that project at scale. But the second one is equally important, which is EPC contractor comfort, right? Which is to get the EPC contractors to do plants number 2 through 10 and start to take the risk of cost overruns and all those other things, right? So that you have a bankable project, right? And then the third is then this learning curve, right? That we've all heard of and heralded, right, as something new, even though it's been around for 70 plus years. And it really talks about, how solar and wind has come down in cost, lithium-ion batteries, et cetera, through, 7 or 8 cumulative doublings of experience, right? And so we're seeing that same with the earth shots that the secretary has put out around long duration energy storage or geothermal or hydrogen or
Yeah.
lots of other areas, right? And so when you think about these Earth shots, right, there is a role that the Loan Programs Office plays as the technology continues to improve, right? So in that learning curve, it's not just the cumulative doubling of old technology. It's the fact that solar panels went from a 12% efficiency in 2003 to a 19.5% efficiency today, right? And those are all incremental, bold innovations that came out of the Department of Energy here, as well as our friends at the University of New South Wales in Australia. And those then get implemented into the manufacturing process, right? And so all of those bold incremental new steps also qualify for the Loan Programs Office, because each one of them was difficult for the commercial banking sector to do. I remember 2 or 3 years ago when bifacial panels were persona non grata by commercial banks, and today everyone's doing bifacial panels, right? So the Loan Programs Office plays a role there. And then the fourth piece, which I think everyone forgets, is Wall Street securitization. Wall Street is a very conservative beast, and they're conservative because S&P and Moody's and Kroll and all the credit agencies are conservative as well. And so what you end up finding is that a lot of these asset classes don't get access to really cheap liquid capital from insurance companies and others because of that. And so we play a role there as well to provide guarantees. And so we have a role to play across all four of those stages. And that leads to full market acceptance, which is how you get to gigaton scale.
Awesome. So let me touch on a couple of things I know that you probably get, and this is just quickly, so kind of short answers, but there are still misconceptions about the LPO and what it does and the effect that you have. So these were terms that were sort of chosen by some of the folks out there that I polled, and one is crowding out. The accusation that what you're doing is crowding out investment.
Well, I mean, for those applicants who have come into the Loan Programs Office, I think they will say to you firmly that they would prefer to go to a commercial bank than to come to us. And so, as much as we can streamline our application, no one would come through our office unless they needed to use our money, right? We are not a place where we're ever going to be as easy or as fast as going to a commercial bank, right? So people subject themselves to our process and the hundreds of hours that it takes to get through our process because they need us to play that liquidity function, because the commercial banks just will not or cannot serve their needs.
Yeah. The other is that you're picking winners.
Well, we're certainly helping everyone who comes into the office, from people who use natural gas as a feedstock to people who are doing nuclear to people who are doing geothermal and hydro or critical minerals or lots of other things. I mean, we do pick winners in the sense that we want people who can get through our office, right? So we want people who have the fortitude to get through our office. Now we have, 20 plus people in our outreach and business development group, and we mentor entrepreneurs and others. But I can say that we have applicants that we started with 18 months ago that just refuse to fill out the checklist. They just can't do it, right? And if that's picking winners, fine. But ultimately, we believe that this transition is going to come from, people who are persistent, who can, get through all of the necessary documentation that we need to get through the process. But we are not preferring one applicant over another. As soon as an applicant is ready with all of their documentation to get through the office, we prioritize them immediately and get them through the office.
Yeah. So history is made by those who show up.
Yep.
Excellent. So maybe just briefly, and again, maybe answering some of the questions of people, there is a direct desire, right, for the private markets to pick up on these technologies, these companies, as they're ready, incremental as. How does the LPO interplay and work with the private capital markets?
Well, we work with them very closely, right? I mean, the vast majority of the commercial markets, want to do what we're doing, but feel like they're prevented from doing it, right? So they feel like their investment committee would never approve that deal. Their managing director would never approve the number of hours it would take to process the deal, et cetera. So they're looking over our shoulder all the time and saying, hey, entrepreneur, we'd love to do deal number 2. We'd love to do deal number 4. We'd love to do deal number 6, depending on where they are. And some of the private sector players are willing to come in on deal number 2. And some of them are saying, we'd like to wait till deal number 10, right? And so they absolutely are looking over our shoulder, and we're making it easier to look over our shoulder. We're putting some strategic mirrors in place, and and making sure that people actually can look over our shoulder, because we want to shorten the amount of time it takes to full market acceptance, right? When you look at the solar and wind business, I'd say we provided the commitments and loans required to bring those projects to fruition back in 2010, mostly. And it wasn't until 2016, I think, that the markets were well functioning and people were getting multiple bids for debt on their projects, right? And so that's a 6-year gap. We'd like to close that to 2 years. And so we are engaging frequently with commercial banks to try to get them more comfortable more quickly.
Excellent, excellent. So I think it has to be asked, and I know you've actually put out a video directly addressing this, but I guess for our guys, maybe briefly, the Inflation Reduction Act, changes a number of things in a very positive way for folks out there, not least of all folks in the territories that I work with. But the LPO, how does the IRA kind of directly influence what you're doing, in brief?
Well, I mean, there's the headline numbers, right? Which is that, we have $100 billion of new loan authority in our existing 3 programs. We have this new program, the 1706 program, which is around helping to take existing energy infrastructure and make it relevant to the energy transition and to the future, and for those communities to continue to get the wealth creation and those people who work in those businesses to continue to be able to work in this field, right? So we're very excited about that. But I would say that the broader benefit of the IRA comes from the fact that it starts to break up the oligopoly that we've created around tax equity, right? And so for a long time, if you weren't one of the top 20 folks, and I represented that oligopoly, so I totally understand it, then it was really hard for you to get access to the limited amount of tax equity that was available today. The IRA allows tribes and nonprofits to get access to tax equity, and so they no longer have to subject themselves through the oligopoly, and that allows for a lot more applicants to come through our office. But it also, I think, provides a lot of empowerment to those groups who, frankly, I think were lukewarm about clean energy because they weren't able to really control their own destiny. And today, I think they're a lot more bold about wanting to shape their own future now that they've been given, this full level of self-determination, which came out of the IRA. And so I think we should be very careful not to discount that sort of feeling of, empowerment that the IRA provides to the broader marketplace in the United States. And then, of course, like we have workforce training dollars in there and lots of other things, which I think are critically important to making sure that everyone participates in this revolution. So,
yeah. I don't, maybe premature, but in terms of the number of groups that are applying for, the loan program office, most, if not all of them, will also probably be benefiting from several of these tax credits or in others. Have you factored it in, or is it going to be factored in, the fact that this now lowers the risk of them being able to execute and access those funds in an effective and timely way, lower the risk perception of their projects that you're lending to?
Yeah, I mean, I think we view it slightly differently. Like from our perspective, there's definitely a lot of money in the IRA, whether it's tax credits or other grant programs and things like that. In general, we don't view it as risk reduction. We think that the core project has the risks that it has, depending on where it is in the across the bridge to bankability. Our sense is it gives the equity investors a higher rate of return, such that they can take those additional risks, right? So it used to be that pre-IRA, some of those returns may have only been 6%, which was not high enough for the equity to be enthusiastic. And today it might be more like 12%, so that they're far more enthusiastic to get into the game, right? And so we think there's a lot more projects that will be enabled because of those tax credits and other programs. But I think the Loan Programs Office has a more fundamental view of each project. And so our feeling is that those projects, I think, always deserved debt. And, but, you know, we're not alone, right? We provide senior debt, and someone has to be able to provide the equity. And in the past, a lot of those equity investors were less than enthusiastic.
Yeah. All right. So running short on time, but the last question, wanted to work in something quickly on modular nuclear because, you know, obviously the DOE business is nuclear, but the newer designs with zero emissions, there's advantages in operational flexibility compared to the older nuclear and more, lower environmental risks. You know, what and how is the LPO responding to support the technology deployment?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty large and involved topic. So, you know,
Short answer.
let me start from a slightly different place. I mean, look, I think that when you think about what's happening in the world today, whether it's the conflict in Ukraine or whether it's just the broad energy tightness that we've had, frankly, for 2 or 3 years, part of that came from us unilaterally putting tools and taking it out of the toolbox and sticking it in the shelf, right? Small modular nuclear reactors being one of them. I think that it is now apparent to everybody that we need all the tools in the toolbox to get to a place of energy abundance where we have, you know, so much energy that energy prices go down, right? That there's a healthy amount of market competition, that, you know, we reduce the energy burden for our, you know, average citizens, and make sure that people have choice, right, across all of those different things. And we want to make sure there's diversity and resiliency so that if a weather event occurs, that there's actually enough resources that can continue to provide that resiliency. Today, you know, we're clearly over reliant on hydro in certain places, and with severe drought, the hydro is underperforming, right? And so I think the small modular reactors, to me, are not a panacea, but they are an essential tool to do that. The other thing I would say is that we have an enormous problem, not just in this country, but around the world, in building transmission. And if you're in a transmission constrained scenario, every single transmission constrained scenario, including the NREL Clean Future study that just came out, shows that nuclear has to be a very prominent role in a decarbonized grid in a transmission constrained scenario. And so I think that, you know, we have a lot of wishful thinking that, like, we can take just a few of the tools and decarbonize our grid by 2035. You know, and I think that wishful thinking is misplaced. The last thing I would say is that, look, I think, you know, we are clearly involved in the Vogtle nuclear plant. We are very proud of the fact that we are involved in that plant. And we are proud of the fact that plant will show that America can do big things again. Was it over budget? Yes. Did it take longer than expected? Of course it did. But we were able to train, you know, over 13,000 workers on how to work in the nuclear energy industry. We were able to really revitalize the supply chain in this country. We were able to get nuclear engineers trained again. And so the reason why small modular reactors are even possible is because of the Vogtle nuclear plant. And now we have all of these trained people that we can use to restart the Palisades nuclear plant in Michigan, to like build the 2 BWRX 300 plants that TVA wants to build at Clinch River, right? That we can help our Canadian friends who want to build 8 of those plants in Ontario and in Saskatchewan, right? We can help our Eastern European friends who've ordered 40 of these reactors, right? And so when you think about all of the totality of what Vogtle has unlocked, it makes the investment far more palatable. And I do think that not just in nuclear, but in hydrogen and in lots of other sectors, building big, complicated, difficult projects is something that the US is going to have the stomach to do in the future. And the small modular reactors is the level of innovation that we need to be able to show people a pathway to building what we call airplanes, not airports, right? So the same product again and again and again, even though it's a complicated product with hundreds of suppliers, with lots of complexity, but it's not custom like every airport. It's the same product again and again and again, so you can benefit from the learning curve, benefit from cost reduction, you know, benefit from maintenance and all the other benefits.
Terrific. Well, Jigar, I want to thank you very, very much for your time and your thoughts here on behalf of National Clean Energy Week and CRES Forum and the other sponsors of this. For everyone else who's out there, thank you for joining us for this fireside chat without fire. And I hope you guys will all enjoy the rest of the policy symposium. And I will probably see several of you guys at the dinner tonight and possibly tomorrow. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.